It's time for CIBL Biz Tips, bringing you actionable strategies to grow and improve your business. Prepare to become civilized.
What's up, Central Illinois? Welcome to CIBL Biz Tips, where we bring you concepts and strategies to grow your business. Today, we have Nick Gentile and John DeFreitas. They are commercial lenders at Town & Country Bank in beautiful Springfield, Illinois. Nick, did I pronounce your name right?
It's Gentile. I should have
Gentile.
at the beginning.
Screwed it up already. That's all right.
No,
Nick
you're
Gentile.
good. The reason we
from
both
Town &
started
Country
laughing
Bank.
is because our chief credit officer does that all the time, and this is a fun thing that we do in the office a lot. So
Gentile. Sorry. I'll remember it for the
I hope you
round.
save your little mess ups for videos later, because it's probably going to be pretty funny.
Sure. We'll make a blooper. In fact,
go.
we're just going to keep this right in there. We're rolling right into biz tips. We're going with it. So what we're doing today, everybody listening, is biz tips. Garrett and I kind of started this like a year and a half ago, and we just kind of ran out of ideas, and we finally figured out that we just need to bring some guests on to talk about biz tips. So the idea is to talk to people that either have questions or have answers for business owners right here in Central Illinois. So what Nick and John are doing, they are wanting to start their own podcast to help grow their business and their following as well. So they've reached out to us and asked some questions. So Garrett and I thought this is our opportunity to maybe record a few things and share what we've done and answer questions that some of our followers might have about starting their own podcast. So Garrett, is there anything I'm missing?
No, I think that's pretty well it. So
okay,
let's roll.
Awesome. So John and Nick, you're getting ready to start your own podcast. Do you have a name for your podcast yet? That's a no. Okay.
Okay, we do have a name, but this has been so the name that we have somewhat settled on is Centers of Influence Podcast.
Okay.
I like it.
Got it.
So what's the concept of the Centers of Influence podcast?
So let me ask you first, what do you see a center of influence as to you?
Well, being in the insurance industry, I see a center of influence being someone who helps us network, is someone who is influential in whatever community or space they're in, that is a trusted advisor, a trusted source of information in that area. That's straight from Wikipedia. I'm just kidding. I made it up.
No,
so
I
what
think
we're trying to do.
Go ahead, John.
Is find people who are centers of influence in the community, business owners, people like you, insurance agents, accountants, people who have been successful and who also are a center of influence and have benefited from centers of influence, and then just talk about that and how it's affected their business and how they've helped others.
Okay.
Awesome.
Perfect.
We like the fact that the center of influence can also be somebody that's not in the business community as well.
Sure.
So we have, especially in Springfield, there are a lot of community leaders who, whether they run a nonprofit or whether they're just, there are sports coaches in town who are probably centers of influence. So folks like that, that we could get connected with and have on the podcast, I think will be beneficial for our listeners too. So having it be about centers of influence allows us to kind of get outside of that business bubble. We probably won't very often, but it allows us the opportunity if we want to.
No, that's great. And that's kind of what I was going to piggyback off of Derek, was that, although I think in the business mindset, we all think centers of influence is a business owner, and that's not necessarily the case. There's plenty of people that volunteer that, maybe work for somebody else that don't own their own business, that are a huge center of influence in a community. That would be a great story that's good at connecting you with people. So I think that's great that you're going to, not just focus on somebody that is a business owner.
Yeah, that's perfect. So as you are starting to work towards starting the Centers of Influence podcast, is that what the name was?
Yeah,
so as you're working towards
as recently as 11 o'clock last night, John, we were still kicking around naming ideas. So but we're pretty well set on that name. So just to
Awesome.
explain why we're laughing at our own podcast name.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is you can change it whenever you want because it's yours. So
Yeah.
Garrett and I used to be the D&G show, and we didn't feel like too many people were that interested in D&G. So we expanded it to the Central Illinois Business Leaders podcast. So,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what has stuck so far.
Yeah. Well,
So
you know,
you can
since
definitely
we've blown
change it.
up to the massive amount of fame that we have, right, Derek? You know, if we stuck with D&G, Dollar General was coming after us at some point.
Yeah, you're
so,
right.
you know, we had to kind of rebrand and, you know, take it a different direction.
So you guys are getting ready to kick off a podcast. What questions have you come up with as you are getting ready to launch this thing?
Yeah, so I think we're realizing that there's a lot more to this to think about up front. You know, how do we want the structure and everything to be? So did you guys sit down and make a list of, you know, this is how we're going to structure our podcast? These are the topics. Like, did you start out with something like that?
Nope. We literally, I think it would have been right around pandemic time, maybe a little after pandemic started. I was listening to an insurance industry podcast, and Garrett and I had talked about it for a while, and we finally just came in and was like, we're starting it. We're just going to do it. We're getting people that own businesses and we're going to bring them on. So all that we knew was we wanted to talk to business leaders in Central Illinois. We kind of made up the script as we went, the structure as we went, and just kind of dove in. So we didn't do a whole lot of planning before we kicked it off. We just kind of started and learned as we went.
Here's the quick plan. Like Derek had talked about, we kind of had spoke earlier on about it, but then of course the pandemic, you know, made it harder to contact people. But I can literally remember him walking through the door on a Monday morning. He walks by my office and he says, "We're doing a podcast." And I'm an overthinker sometimes. I worry too much about all of the processes and everything that comes along with it. Derek's like, "No, dude, we're doing it. It's going to happen. We're going to do it." And so he's just like, and there's no script, you know, most of the time when we get a guest on, you know, once we kind of hear their story, they flow with it, and it really becomes just pretty conversational, pretty easy going down the road. So
I think you have to have that. I mean, we have had plenty of things come up that could potentially stall this process. I mean, we talked about before we came on, you know, the company that we work for is going through a transition right now that could have potentially delayed it. You know, I just had my first child a few weeks ago. That could have delayed it, but I'm sitting at home on paternity leave. John's still texting me about things that we've got to make sure that we get done, telling me to check the notes. So I think that you've got to have that person, and John's definitely been that out of the two of us too. So I'm glad that you guys.
Yeah, Nick has done nothing to help this process at all. Nothing.
Hey, I scheduled this meeting, so you can't.
There you go.
No, that's good. So you're trying to work on, I guess, setting up your structure. You've got your name figured out. What's next on your list that you're wanting to figure out?
Well, you know, it's just the like, how do we start doing this? Like right now I'm using my cell phone on a little tripod. Do we use webcams? Do we use I mean, the cameras on cell phones are great, but is that what we use, or do we use a DLSR? I mean, there's a million options out there, right?
I think for Derek and I, we probably both started out kind of basic. He was probably a little more advanced in the technology side of it than I was. You know, we've got a laptop that we use, and I had initially used the camera from the laptop, and noticed his camera, you know, made him look a little bit better than me. And, you know, Derek's prettier than what I am anyways, but, you know, so I wanted to catch up. So, you know, really our stuff, you know, that we've used our microphones, our cameras, you know, I think our camera is from Amazon. What's it? $40-$50. Our microphone we picked up on Amazon, and I've went through a second one here just because I felt like this one that Derek had sounded better than my initial one. So, I mean, in all reality, Derek, and just cameras and microphones, what are we, $100? I mean, we don't have a ton of money invested in it.
To help explain how much technical knowledge or technical backing we have on this podcast, I don't even know what DSLR means. So
Neither do I. My wife has a nice Canon camera, and I think that's what it says on the box. So
gotcha. Okay. So yeah, like Garrett said, to start with, I think we were just using, when we first started, we have a webcam on our little laptop, and we were just talking without a mic. It was just a laptop. That's all we used to start with. I will say, if I were telling anybody to buy anything to start a podcast, it would be the microphone. And what Garrett and I both use now is,
it's like a
Samson SAMSON Q2U. And I can tag that in the show notes here, but Amazon has it for like $70, I think. It's a Samson Q2U. And we got some arms that were like $10 off of Amazon just to hold it. And it's clear enough to where I'll answer, like our phone system in our office. I answer the phone through the microphone, and I bought a second one for my home office too. Yeah. So
I will tell you, the microphone makes a huge difference. I had one that was probably a $40 or $50 one that had really good reviews on Amazon. And part of the reason I bought it, because it looked cool, to be honest with you, but it was not as clear. You know, when we would listen back to our podcast, Derek's voice sounded much more clear and much more crisp than what mine did. And this microphone, I think, is a real good bang for the buck.
Yep. Actually, I would start with a microphone for sure.
I've seen other guys recommend that on YouTube and things. Those are supposed to be pretty good microphones. So
yeah, it was good. And it's just got a USB plug in. So it plugs in USB and you're ready to go. Yep. All right. So I think for now, guys, that is probably enough for the first ever, I guess, revamp of the CIBL Biz Tips. Nice. We're going to catch you guys here in a little bit, and we'll answer a few more questions about the podcast. We're going to try to keep these short, 10 minutes or so. So until next time, John and Nick, thanks. Y'all have been civilized. Catch you on the next show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/CIBL podcast. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It's the civilized thing to do.